Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. We are now on health and lifestyle, and this morning I'm joined by Nyokafi Kinuthia on my far right. She is the founder, Tuatunze Learning Center. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Good morning.
Much appreciated. On my immediate left is Pauline Wamukowa. She's the director, Mali Therapy Center. And we are going to be talking about autism awareness. And ladies, this is a subject matter that many people have no understanding about and would want emphasis on, and they seek explanations about, therefore, the educative part of it. I first begin with you, Nyokafi, and this is the first question. In terms of the condition, how does one identify the question of autism, and what's the diagnosis? What would he or she look out for?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I think the first thing, when you have a child is just trying to figure out what the milestones are. You know, there could be delayed milestones. It could be speech, maybe behavior issues. Sometimes you don't know. Maybe that's your first child, so you wouldn't know. So maybe just asking your pediatrician to figure out, to say that maybe my child is having issues with maybe walking, maybe mobility and movement. When you start seeing delays or you compare your kid with other kids in the playground, ask your doctor, ask other people, ask other parents, because the earlier you identify the issues, the much better, the earlier you're able to start therapies. So, ask around, read about it, research.
Yeah, and Pauline, what are the early signs? Because I'm sure this conversation will automatically dovetail into the aspects of then genetic counseling to some extent, the science behind it. But what are the early signs that anyone will look out for?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. So for autism spectrum disorder, first we need to know that it is a neurological disorder. So I look at it as the brain being put in a pot, So if the brain is not trained, therefore it does not grow at the same pace as anyone else. So the first signs that you would look out for is social interaction. Social interaction, eye contact, tiptoeing, gut issues. You see the child has a weak gut, there's a lot of diarrhea, there's a lot of blockage, and so those are the first things. And it starts as early as 6 months, So when the child is breastfeeding, for the breastfeeding mothers, when the child is breastfeeding and the child is not able to look at you, so those are we need to understand the milestones that the children go through. If you decide to have a child, it's very important, and it starts with the mother because of that one-on-one connection. So it starts at that point of breastfeeding. There are children who are not able to suckle, so that means that the gums are not going to develop. So that suckling is very important. That eye contact is very important. That sitting at around 4 to 6 months is very important. That crawling is very important because it helps in the building of muscles. You see, it builds those muscles. So if your child is not able to crawl, that means that the motor ability. You see some people have very different handwritings. You see, and you say, me, I just have a poor handwriting and all that. No, but it's a muscular issue. So that is where occupational therapy comes in. So it goes to the crawling and to the walking. There are others who walk very, very fast. There are others who take a lot of time to walk. So those are the signs that we need to look at. When it comes to school, there are people you're told, oh, you are slow. You don't know how to, you didn't read at the right time. You didn't write at the right time. Those are things because autism is, you can even identify it even in adulthood. So it's quite a variety.
Actually, I was coming to that point because probably the question was then, is it an issue that is confined to childhood and not adulthood? But Nyokafi, I'm sure you want to come on this. Is there then difference in terms of identifying these signs when one is at the childhood stage and during adulthood? Because if someone is an adult, can he be in a position, despite attaining the age of maturity, to identify the causes? other than when one is childhood, so that you'll be in a position as the parent to identify certain specific gaps in his behavior?
Yeah, I think there could be delayed diagnosis or misdiagnosed, right? Where the child or the individual just keeps, as Pauline was saying, as they get older and the schools are saying, oh, the child is naughty, the child is misbehaving. So the child just goes through this system of not being diagnosed and not getting the right support. Right, so the earlier the better. And so you have adults or children who've grown, they're teens, and you're seeing the signs more now. And then maybe they start going to doctors and saying, well, they're on the spectrum. So it's very difficult to be able to now start therapies, as we were talking before, even with Pauline, before we got in here, that the older the child is, the harder for us to start the intervention, because now the brain has grown, the behaviors have stuck, there's been no intervention. So people are misdiagnosed or don't get the support. It's dangerous, because now you're adult, you're 15, 16, 17, you haven't been writing, you haven't been performing well in school, you know, we don't even know what vocational services, we don't know what your gifts are. You know, because sometimes these kids are very gifted, a lot of potential in them, you know. And so it's important to identify the child. Maybe the child likes to sing. Maybe the child likes to, I don't know, play with blocks and can do carpentry. So they have so many skills they can do. If we don't identify in the beginning, they're just lost. And of course, when a child doesn't feel supported, what happens is the behaviors become worse, right? And so the emotions become worse. If they don't have speech and language therapy, what happens? They can't communicate. So they become violent and emotional, and parents get frustrated. So many people are just left at home, or imagine on the outskirts of Nairobi, there's no services. So it's so important to be able to come in, accept, figure out where to go, get the right help. You know, maybe this school might not be the first setting, might not be the best, but you gotta keep going. You know, parents just have to just keep going and support each other. Because as you know, as we talked about it, you know, early intervention is the most important thing. We really like to work with younger kids from the ages of 2 or 1.5, you know, because then we're able to mold them and then figure out what direction they're gonna go to. You know, there are many kids on the spectrum who are successful, you know, because it's a spectrum. You can have high functioning, ones that walk, talk, socialize. You can have lower functioning who need more vocational training. So the earlier you identify, the much better.
Yeah. And Pauline, then in terms of talking about the identification, are the causes similar at childhood and during adulthood?
That's a debatable question, because we still don't really know the cause. And I can tell you the only sure cause that the researchers know right now is genetic. Yeah. So we know that genetically you can be able to get autism if maybe, you know, So the other causes are you can have acquired autism.
Okay.
Yes, you can acquire autism along your life. Maybe there's a hearing problem. I can say, for example, at the center, we have children that come in, and you look at them and you say they don't fit the characteristics of autism completely, but there are some few characteristics. So you go deeper and research, and you find, no, they have maybe a growth in the ear, maybe they had an accident, maybe when they were born, there were some difficulties, challenges with the pregnancy. And once you're able to find out the real cause, then you're able to define the right intervention for them. For example, if a child has a blockage in the ear, that comes with fluid in the ear and sometimes growth in the ear. If you're able to remove that growth and do vigorous speech therapy, then the child falls off the wagon of autism, you see. So that is where acquired autism, sometimes trauma, separation from parents. I like talking about stories, you know. My personal stories that I've experienced, I've seen children who've been affected by separation and divorce, and the child just goes mute. That's selective mutism. So selective mutism also comes with other characteristics. That's now when the child goes quiet and the social interaction goes low, so that means the brain is not activated, manipulated. So that means that the brain will not grow. So the child goes quiet, and when the parent was reintroduced, the speech came back, you see. So there are so many causes. Sometimes they say the vaccine, that's a big debate.
Yeah.
Sometimes they say watching too much screen time at a certain age, because the tricky age is from around 1.5 years to 3 years. That is where now the child is able to pick and absorb different materials. So if the child is put on the screen so much, there's research that shows 1 hour, 1 hour of screen time takes at least 12 words from your child. So you can imagine the way our children these days, they are watching Cocomelon, they are watching all this. And this, remember, this material they are watching, if it is not interactive, they're not able to interact, you know. I'm not saying that screen time is completely bad, no. I'm just saying you have to be intentional about what you allow your child. So there are so many causes, and we are only sure about just one, that genetic one.
And in your Nyokabe, then the question of the institution of parenting. I mean, a union that is gelled together definitely will inform proper growth of any kid, whether he or she. And biologically, children will get intelligence and immunity through breastfeeding, which is very key. Therefore, how important are mothers in this entire conversation? One, from that perspective, biology. And then two, to identify the manifestation and the trend of the characteristics. And is awareness created? Is there enough awareness among parents to try and understand, to establish whether this can cause autism, and that understanding around the institution of parenting?
That's a long question. Okay. Well, I think the relationship between mothers and children is special, whether or not your child has any learning challenge. I think mothers play a big role in the bond. I mean, of course, we're the ones who give birth and everything. And the support of the husbands and fathers is also required. I think culturally, I think, you know, it's harder for dads and men just to accept that your child is not perfect, or your son may not play sports, or, you know, so I think the parents I deal with, I think the male part of the family struggle. And I think parents separate a lot during that thing, because there's a lot of blame, but it's because of lack of knowledge, right? And lack of awareness. So I have parents where the diagnosis is done and all of a sudden the parents have separated. You know, the dad is confused and overwhelmed. So yes, teamwork is best. If the institutions are working together with both parents, I mean, that's the ideal situation, right? That we're able to do it. But I mean, as soon as you get the diagnosis, the most important thing is to share and educate your family members. Because what normally happens, the extended family is also confused, right? They're like, why is your child not talking? You know, grandparents who don't know, like, what's happening? And so it becomes a blame game. Maybe it's you married from, especially in our culture, maybe from this area or this tribe. So it's always looking for places to blame. And that's time wasting. Right? Because now the family is having issues, and then as you're going on, the child is 5 and 6. So as soon as we can accept and the family can support, but educate the parents, educate the members of your community, ask for help. You know, say that we need help, and educate them that, you know, for example, there's a birthday party coming and your child is going to the party. Inform the people there that, you know, the noise is going to be too much, and instead of keeping your child home, right? So the family, the foundation of the family is always much better when they're together. And then we can work together. But the acceptance and the lack of denial is what the biggest issue is, I think.
Yeah. And Pauline, how about the therapy, and what does it entail in terms of the intervals? I mean, is the age a factor here? Is gender a factor here? And the intervals about the therapy to treat autism?
So you've mentioned 3 things: age, gender, intervals. Very important. I'll start with age. So the brain is very malleable, but it also depends on the age. Above 10 years, there's research, clear research, that shows that by that time, the brain has already acquired habits, trends, patterns. So it is hard for you to change. You know, if I have decided by the age of 10 I love red, so it is very hard for you to convince me to love pink, you know, just an example. So definitely age is important. That's why we focus on early intervention. If you start early, then you are able to ensure that your child has acquired the basic activities of daily living, you know, showering, toileting, feeding, dressing, writing. Those are basic life skills that people take so for granted, but they are very important. But when it comes to above 10 years, it becomes a challenge, you know. This is now like you're forcing me to acquire new habits, and it takes longer. So interventions are better when you start early. So when you talk about gender, I can tell you, like I said, I like talking about facts.
Yes.
We have 35 children at the center, and 4 are girls, 31 are boys. What does that say? So this is something that I would really love even the government to look at, because if we are not going to do something about our education system, making it inclusive, you know, putting it in the law and making it inclusive, that it is mandatory for these children to be accepted in the schools, can you imagine what will happen to our boys?
Yeah.
There's a big challenge because they are more, autism is more prevalent in boys. And the girls, I don't know why, there's no clear research that shows why this is like this, but yes, age is a factor. When you talk about intervals, I see that is something that I have a challenge with the parents, you know, and that lack of understanding, lack of awareness. You are told that your child needs speech therapy, and instead of, and you decide that you will do speech therapy once in a month. That will not help your child. I can tell you. I tell parents minimum services. If you've gotten your diagnosis, and you know, you've been told speech, occupational, I know it is very expensive, and it is a challenge, but I can tell you the best option. Look for, you can train yourself. There are so many YouTube channels. There are so many support groups that you can join to learn, so that even that, if you decide you can only afford once a month, I can tell you the best is for you to make sure that the other days of the month, the child is getting at least some motivation, you know, some, what can I say, activation, brain activation, let me just say that. So the minimum I would recommend as a professional is 3 times a week. 3 times a week, so that you have that consistency. And different children, different ages, different diagnoses will give you different therapy methods, you know. So it's not like one program fits all.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Yeah. And Nyokabe, then the question of handling of these autistic children, let's take that for example, because they need handling, they need care. How should it happen in the context of the school environment and at home as well?
I think the biggest thing is training, even caregivers at home. I think, again, going back to acquiring knowledge and awareness, right? So if you have your nannies at home, they should also be trained. And the mainstream schools also who are accepting kids with learning challenges, also there's a lack of proper training in that setting, because kids are being put in classrooms where they're not thriving because there's lack of knowledge and training, and also lack of honest conversations. You know, that if you own the school and the kids are coming in, the school is responsible to explain that, you know, this program requires a child to write, or this program requires a child to take assessments. What if the child cannot take those assessments? What are we doing to accommodate these children? How can, as you're talking about the educational system, you know, take the kids knowing that, okay, you can't take this exam, but maybe you can type it. Maybe we can reread. How do we accommodate it? Because everyone has a different learning styles. Even neurotypical people, everyone has a different learning style. I'm a visual learner. You could be a different kind of learner. So identifying the learning style of that child is so important, so that we can push them to the highest potential, right? What's happening is, because no one knows, and you know, autism is a really big poster that's being talked about a lot now. There's different things under autism. You know, not every disability is autistic.
Yeah.
You know, there could be dyslexia, there could be Asperger's. There's so many kind of things. So getting the proper diagnosis is where you start from. And then talking about it, accepting it. Yes, I know there's pain, there's grief, there's shame, there's stigma. There's all that stuff happening at the same time, but be sure not to stay in the grief, because you've got to go to action mode. You've got to accept and say, okay, fine, this is my budget. And then come to us professionals and be honest. You know, we're open, we listen. First of all, we're women, we're mothers. So we listen, But the consistency is the main thing, that you must continue with the services, even during the holiday breaks. You don't have the luxury of your child just sitting at home for 5 weeks over the holiday and not doing much, because then when we come back to school, we're starting from scratch again, right? So you have to be consistent with, there's so much resources online, as Pauline was saying. There's YouTube, there's things, we send videos at our center, we give you things to go work on. So you have to continue, because we're not miracle workers, you know. You can't come to us and also ask us to fix all the problems. Yeah, we have to work together. Us, the professionals, the school systems also, we can train the teachers, we can talk about it because we know what we're talking about. If we work together as a team, you know, everyone involved, it's more successful. But definitely it's the knowledge and awareness.
Yeah, I mean, we're having this conversation against the backdrop of what appears to be a problem that is now becoming a common denominator among families and setups across the country and around the world. But for the persons who have no accessibility to digital gadgets, as you have mentioned, who are not in a position to teach themselves from YouTube, for example, who cannot speak English or Swahili, who are in far-flung counties, for example, very distant from Nairobi. I mean, how can such people be reached, and do they even understand what this is?
That's a tough challenge, because, you know, we get calls from everywhere. I'm sure you do too, from all over, Turkana. I mean, they call, and I spend a lot of time on the phone just trying to figure out how to reach out. And the hardest thing, I think, also when you're out in those far lands, is the stigma and the shame. And that's why a lot of kids are hid at home, you know, and they don't come out. And maybe the child just needed a whole year of intervention, and then the child is back on track. So I think if the government did more outreach programs, you know, and actually put people in there and insisted that these kids must go to school. There's laws, right? And, how do you protect them when they're in school? If they're nonverbal, what are you offering? Are you doing sign language? What other visual tools are you using? So it's up to the, you know, we are little people in the whole, we're trying, but there's people bigger than us, you know, who make decisions.
Comes to the question of policy now.
Exactly. You know, so the policies were there and say, even if you're in, I don't know, far, the farthest place, I don't know where, and your child must go to school, or you must get the therapies, and the government is able to support those things, it would work better. But if we don't talk about it and we think that problem is going to go away, it's not going away. And what's happening is that the kids are losing the services, and the parents are ashamed to go and tell the school that the child can't walk or talk or is not potty trained at 10. So what does the mother do? Or if the father leaves the home, the mother just holds on to the child, right? And so the child is left there inside, and the other siblings are going to school. And what does that individual feel? They feel not loved, they feel insecure. And that's where now the issues come out, because now you're 17, 18, you're strong, there's a lot of violence, right? Because no one loves me. Everyone needs love. And we love these children. I don't see the disability. I see the child as a holistic child. There's nothing to fix because they're not broken, right? So if we look at them as broken, then they're going to feel broken. If you tell a kid you're broken, you can't hear, you can't this, what are you going to do? You're going to feel like that. You're going to accept that label, right? So the policy people are the ones who can open these doors.
The ball is in their court now.
Exactly. The ball is in their court. Because we're little fish. We're here trying to make little difference. But they're the ones in charge can say, we must have services in all the areas. All kids must go to school. Services must be provided. We must train our teachers. Because the teachers are overwhelmed. Also, they don't know ADD. They don't know all these new terms coming up. And so what do they do when the child is behaving? They're naughty. You know, they can't, and they ignore the child because they've got 20 other kids in the classroom.
All right. Pauline, coming to you then. I mean, we live in a society that is deep in terms of its cultural beliefs, and more than 40 of the communities that make up our ethnic demography often have their own set of cultural beliefs, traditions, and norms. And in many of these setups, some cultures tend to support cases of close relatives who marry each other. Legally, there's no problem with that. And in terms of the culture, there's an acceptance. But from the genetic perspective, how is this a contributory factor, especially when close cousins marry each other? I don't want to mention names.
That's, you're putting me in a, and it is not good. What I can say is definitely, if you can imagine, if there's the autism gene in that family and two cousins marry each other. So what happens? You might find 2 or 3 children. You give birth to 2 or 3 children, and all of them are on the spectrum. So I do not think, I don't want to really go deep into that, but I would say it is not good, definitely. And also, there's a lot of stigma. I'll just want to maybe comment on the question you asked, Nyokabi. There's a lot of stigma in the rural areas when it comes to anything, any child with disability, mental disorder, be it autism, Down syndrome, dyslexia, you know. There's a lot of stigma back home. So I'm glad that the National Council of Persons with Disabilities with the government, they're able to launch in January, end of January, they're able to launch the monograph report. So for the first time, the government is supporting us. And we can see they have partnered with a number of organizations that know what is going on in the grassroots. Because I can tell you, even in those marginalized areas, there are small organizations that are trying to do something. So if the government continues with these outreach programs, they can call on professionals, and they can go and train and form support groups and train mothers. And because with this report that they have launched, they are able to know in Samburu, what do we have? In Garissa, what do we have? In Mandera, what do we have? In Kisumu, what do we have? And we have these small organizations that are on the ground that are already doing something. So for me, that would be a start, you know? Help with more awareness and with early interventions when the parents are able to see that, oh, okay, this is not a mental illness. My child is not mad. My child is not cursed. My child is not uchawi, you know. They are able to then accept that person, and even be able to talk about it and say, oh, I went to this institution, I got help, my child was able to toilet train, my child was able to feed, my child is now speaking 1 or 2 words. And so I would say that supporting those institutions that are already there doing something about these challenges could be the starting point to opening up and talking about awareness.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Nyokabi, do social situations or social setups make autistic persons, whether adult or child, uncomfortable in terms of their association?
Yes. I mean, they have a lot of sensory challenges, you know, loud noises. They're not able to interact. Sometimes, you know, they do alone play. They have situations where maybe like in church or weddings, you know, there's so many things going on. So even churches have to be aware of that, you know, if you're having a Sunday school, you know, maybe create a quieter room for these children. But first it begins, as we're always saying, going back to the home. You accepting your child as an issue, so you come into your church or the family gathering and saying that my child has this disability. So unless we can make these changes, you know, because they're affected, you know, you find them covering their ears because of the loudness, you find lighting, so many things are happening at the same time. And also routine, you know, because they thrive from routine. So maybe that day you've decided and you haven't informed your child, you know, just because your child doesn't have expressive language, tell them as you're going somewhere, show them pictures. You know, like today we're going to go to the grocery store, tomorrow we're going to talk to them where you're going. I always tell my parents, tell them you're going somewhere. Don't just put them in the car and drive to Mombasa. The child had no clue you were going anywhere. So imagine being cooped up in a car for 7 hours. Maybe they thought they were just going to the grocery store. So talk to the child, show pictures, you know, show we're going here. They're looking, they're understanding. I think the myth that the fact that the person is mute or silent is that they're listening. Even if they're deaf, they're visually seeing. You know, there's ways to communicate to them. So the more you talk to the child about what's going to happen, or a change of school, or a change of nanny, then they're able to understand, you know, changing things, thinking that, oh, that child is not talking, or the child's capability of understanding is not. No, they're sensitive, they hear us, they love, you know, touching is an issue, but once they trust you, they can trust, but communicate with that child. Always don't assume they're not feeling it. They feel it, they feel the negativeness, they feel the separation, they're sensitive. They're sensitive, just like we all are. You know, we all want to be included.
Yeah.
Everybody, even adults. right? If you go to your office and no one's talking to you and you're in a cubicle the whole day, it's depressing. You want to make friends and connections. You want to have play dates. You know, be able to have play dates. Talk to another mother and say, well, you know, I want my kid to come to your house. Explain to that mother that maybe the kid is on a special diet. Maybe loud music is not, no sugar, whatever diet is doing. Talk. Communicating saves a lot of things, because once a child comes to the function, everyone's quiet. You know, that feeling of awkwardness. Maybe the child is wearing a diaper at 9, so you haven't told that person what's going on with your child. So talking about it helps kill the myths, the stigma, the negativity, and the child just wants to play, and maybe at that particular point, he's going to be or she at the corner playing alone. It's okay. You know, they'll slowly, we teach them how to come together and play in groups. But talking about it and being able to share is the most important thing, I think, in our culture.
And Pauline, we have talked about some contributory factors and what to watch out for, especially for those who have kids and, of course, at the adulthood stage, and someone may be mature enough to pick up some signs. But how are families that are breaking up at a rate that is so alarming across the country contributing to this, especially in the context of one being a child?
Breaking up of families doesn't affect neurodivergent kids only, even neurotypicals. Yes. So, but the pressure, you see, when you have the diagnosis for ASD, there's something, communication is a barrier. So you can imagine everything that you want to express is in your mind, and you're not able to give it out. It's very painful. You can see your parents fighting, you can see them separating, you can see everything that is going on, but you're not able to express yourself. I can tell you, children thrive in a complete family. I know some situations are, you know, you can't help. Some children were born out of maybe single mothers, you know. So it is okay. So from the time the child was born, their environment, once it's shifted, it affects them directly. If the child was born without a father figure, it is okay. It will not affect them, because definitely the environment that the child grows up in really affects them a lot. But I can tell you, if there was a separation, definitely the child is going to be affected negatively. And we see that, and we talk to parents, we ask them, is there a way that you can find a middle ground when it comes to this child? Because as much as we are doing interventions here and there, we are looking at the interests of the child mainly, and we are looking at how to help them. So the families that have accepted to come together, you can see the child thriving. But the ones that don't, you can see the challenge that is definitely there. So definitely the communities, we're supposed to be, you know, the family unit is very important for any child to thrive, for any child's growth. But if it is not possible to maintain that unit, I would just advise, let us see how to find a middle ground. But I will say it again, that if the child was born in a different environment, there was no father figure, the mother was there, that is the environment they know. So they are okay. So unless now they're exposed to a different environment, and then the mind starts craving for that extra, you know, because the mind will only be exposed to what it is shown. Yeah.
All right. And in your copy, the question of now, we talked about stigma and the need for a departure, and you demystified the stigma around autism. But what about situations where parents of autistic children, they themselves doubt the capability of what this kid can achieve in the event he overcomes that?
We were talking earlier before we got in here with Pauline, and was saying sometimes, unfortunately, the parents or the adults can actually be the people who are hindering progress, you know, because they come to us with sometimes unrealistic expectations because of denial. And, you know, if you're in denial of the situation, then you're going to end up going to this institution, and changing the child's environment all the time because you're not accepting it. So that stigma is what's holding back the parents from accepting and getting the proper services. Because after a year with me or with Pauline, we're talking about it outside, they want change. They want to see this huge magical change. And sometimes it doesn't happen. Yeah. Or comparing your kid with A and B, how come the kid is talking, this kid is not talking, you know, what are you doing wrong? I'm like, that's why it's a spectrum, right? That's why there's a huge range of capabilities. Some kids will talk, some kids may not talk. So we are the professionals who say, well, based on our assessment, this is the journey and the steps we want to take. It's very important to have an honest conversation. And it's difficult because parents are exhausted. They're paying a lot. You know, for example, if you're going to a mainstream school, you're asked to bring a shadow teacher, then you have therapies, then you have fees, then you have all that stuff. So it's a lot of money. And maybe
so it's expensive to educate an autistic child.
Completely, especially in our culture where the policy people are not making those adjustments. If they could, there's ways or systems that can be set up to help these services to be cheaper. But it's a lot of work. So as professionals, we also have to, you know, it's also a business, you know, as much as we love the kids. And it's very expensive. It is a very expensive thing to take about, to have any child with learning disabilities, because traditionally, we're used to a traditional school system where the kid goes to school, they study, they pass, they go to college. That's the idea, right? That's how we're brought up. You know, passing is a big thing, study, pass. So if you're not passing and you're not being able to study, what happens? You're lost in the system. So we're getting better because the services are more now. We're talking about it. Here we are talking about it. You know, 10, 15 years ago, you guys wouldn't have us on the show because it was something that was kept secret and it's something that's negative. But now parents are coming out. There's a lot of parents who are supporting each other. And so once we can break the stigma, once we can offer solutions and find cheaper ways to help them, I think we'll be more successful.
Yeah. And Pauline, do we have statistics and data bank where we can say this is the exact number of autistic children across the country, or autism generally? Or is it an issue that you are dealing with by case scenario, where you can talk about your experiences and how you have handled that, and instead of depending on, for example, say, the availability of data in order to now tailor-make solutions to this problem, and then the policymakers can be in a very easy position to even choreograph law and policies to that effect?
The statistics now are 1 to 49. And so I can tell you that right now, those are the researchers. That is the current statistic. But I can tell you, I think it's more than that. Because if you, for example, I went to a forum and I asked a question, how many of you here know someone who has an autistic child or who's been affected by autism directly or indirectly? And I can tell you 3/4 of the room. I think we are just not talking about it. And for the mere fact that we are here, that means that it's become a challenge that cannot be ignored. And for the policy makers, they need to go to the ground. I'm glad that there's something that is being done right now. I can tell you the monograph reports, half of it was just talking about autism. Yeah? It is such a big challenge that if education is one of the sustainable goals that we are looking at, you can imagine our schools are not able to accept our children. So how are we going to take care of the children on the spectrum, of the children with we call them mental disabilities? You know, how are we going to plan for them if we've not even accepted that this is the challenge that is there? How are we going to take care of their diet? How are we going to take care of their health? How are we going to help the parents be able to purchase tools that can help them? I can tell you, for example, these children love building blocks and puzzles. These things are so expensive. Let me tell you, they are so expensive. Therapies are so expensive. For example, the cheapest speech therapist you can get is 4,000 shillings. Tell me, and then you are told you need minimum of, you have come to Pauline as a professional. She's told you, I need your child to have at least 3 sessions of speech. So that is 4 times 3 in a week, 12. Right? 12. That is one therapy. Maybe I'm looking at muscular issues. We are going to occupational therapy. It's the basic therapy that all the kids at least are getting. So the cheapest you'll get is, I'm looking at the level 5 hospitals, let's say 1,500, yeah? 1,500, I've told you 3 times in a week. So I'm just trying to tell you, so that is speech and occupational only. We are looking at music therapy. We are looking at all these therapies. I can tell you the minimum that a parent with a child on the spectrum will spend in a week, if you want your child to get consistent services, the best is around 50,000. How many parents can afford that?
That's the question.
How many? Very few. So that is why we need our policymakers to come in and help us. Make education inclusive. Help us. Let the schools have this. We have government-trained therapists. Make sure that all these government schools have these therapists available for us cheaply and affordably.
Thank you. And Nyokabe, one final question. What is the one thing, one perception about autism that you would like to change?
That I would like to change? I think educating people to understand that they're just humans. You know, I think, and I always say, everyone has a little bit of autism, as I call it, in them. Everyone, even you, all of us here have it, you know. We are not perfect creatures. And I think understanding that it is not a death sentence. You know, it is just the beginning of a new journey. It is just you creating and curating a new journey for your child. You know, love your child, you know, show them love, talk about it. Come out to support groups. There's so many support groups now on social media. So I'd like to change the fact that this child is not broken. This child needs love. They need proper services. And they're there. The services are there. Look for us. Find us. Yeah.
Thank you. Your time is all appreciated. I do appreciate your company here. Nyokabe Kinodia is the founder to Atunza Learning Center. Thank you so much for this timely discussion. And to as well, Pauline Wamukowa, the Director, Mali Therapy Center, for your input on this subject that appears to be dogging the Kenyan society, the African, and by the world, and the world by extension. And we thank you for your time and presence here on the broadcast.
Thank you.
Thanks to you too as well for waking up with us here on Daybreak since 6 a.m. and keeping your contributions coming on X. The hashtag has been Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Tomorrow, Trevor will be here with the State of the Nation. Good morning.